I want to kick off this exploration by talking a bit about some of the common tasks that you probably wish you could accomplish every time you go through installing a new copy of Microsoft Windows. It's worth mentioning, too, that everything we're talking about here works with more or less all the different installation options, although as we move over to Nano Server, it's just a slightly different in terms of the commands that are needed. These activities we're working with here also work with the desktop versions of the OS. If you have a copy of Windows 10, well, many of the things that we're doing here sort of also work if you want to get just a bit farther with the images that you have for deploying out your desktop OSs. Now, what we're about to step through here begins really with a regular Windows WIM image right there off the DVD ISO media. If you take a look there in the /sources subfolder there inside the ISO that you download from Microsoft.com, you're going to find a whole long list of different files and folders that exist there in that location. But the reality is that there are in fact two different files that are really necessary for the installation of Microsoft Windows. One is called boot.wim and the second is called install.wim. We've been working already with a kind of a variant of boot.wim already in creating this Windows PE environment that we used back in that last module. We took that copy of the boot.wim and put it over on our USB stick and booted to that Windows PE environment to then transfer a copy of the install.wim, which in our case over there was actually a Nano server, onto an awaiting piece of hardware. Well, what we're doing here focuses our attentions very specifically on the install.wim file. We're going to take a copy of that install.wim file and first remove some of the unneeded installation options out of the WIM itself. If you recall back actually a couple of modules ago when we were going through the next finish version of a Windows install, there were, I believe, 4 different install options that existed there in that list as we first booted from the DVD media. Well, we can actually, with a couple of different PowerShell commands here, remove out all those unnecessary installation options to protect ourselves from inadvertently installing the wrong version of the OS. We also can download whatever Microsoft updates .msu files from Microsoft.com that are the current list of security updates and really anything else that Microsoft provides to bring that machine to a full state of compliance as it relates to the different security updates that we require. We also need to install some drivers, and if you've ever gone through unpacking a driver all the way down to its constituent files and folders, you're used to seeing a series of files and folders that kind of look the same from driver to driver. There are some INF files in there, there's usually some .sys files, and some other kind of goofy files in addition to those that are the actual driver content itself. We will unpack a driver that we have here. I've got a copy of the drivers that are used by VMware Workstation, but you could honestly use really any driver install that you have at hand to unpack it, to put it in the proper format, and then with a single PowerShell command, slipstream that driver and all its content there into the offline version of this image so that it's available for plug and play to figure out what needs to be installed and then automatically install the driver that exists there on the image itself. And then lastly, because we're here and because at some point later we may want to do some work with Hyper-V, we also want to go through making sure that the appropriate Windows features, or in this case the Hyper-V role, are automatically installed at the moment we go through the installation of the OS. As I mentioned, our whole reasoning here is to take us just that much further through to what our final goal is for whatever machine we're working on. And so with this image, then with all these different things applied to it, we can then use this copy of the WIM file and apply it to an awaiting machine to get ourselves just that much closer to the actual Hyper-V machine that we ultimately want to build. I should mention also that what you're about to see here is probably the most difficult and the most manual of all the different ways in which you can do deployment of Windows operating systems. We have other tools out there like Windows Deployment Services, WDS. There's the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, MDT. There's System Center Configuration Manager and a whole manner of third-party other solutions that can accomplish this with more automation. But those tools can be very difficult to understand or really appreciate how to use until you've spent the time here right at the very lowest level, understanding exactly what we're doing here with these images. And so while we won't talk about WDS, MDT, or SCCM here in this course or this module, everything you learn here will be directly relatable to expanding your experience should you choose to incorporate those technologies into your infrastructure.